It never occurred to me that the safest place in my life, the farm that I considered home, would become the backdrop for an inescapable secret. When my nephew looked at me one day, it wasn't just family affection I saw in his eyes. It was something forbidden and perilous. I was paralyzed, caught between fear and a yearning I hadn't experienced in years. What followed altered everything I believed about love and about myself. For decades, the farm had been my refuge, a place where life moved at its own leisurely pace. After the death of my husband, I immersed myself in the daily tasks of farm life, attempting to fill the emptiness in my heart. It worked for a time: the early mornings, the scent of fresh soil, and the animals' companionship became my comfort. However, as time passed, the silence within the house grew overwhelming, and loneliness began to seep in. That's when Justin, my nephew, arrived to live with me. In his mid-20s, he was robust, resourceful, and brought a youthful vigor that seemed to revitalize the aging farm. Having him there was a relief, though initially, I didn't grasp the full extent of it. His laughter echoed in the barn, his steady tone filled the vacant kitchen, and his presence softened the sharp edges of my isolation. Justin was not merely useful, he was attentive. He paid attention to the little things: a loose board on the porch, the dwindling supply of my favorite tea, or the way I rubbed my shoulder after a long day. His concern felt sincere, and for the first time in years, I felt truly noticed. It was a sensation I had almost forgotten. Our days were occupied with work, moving hay bales, feeding animals, fixing fences, and the evenings brought peaceful moments on the porch, with the sound of crickets filling the air and Justin by my side. His presence, a steady comfort. But as days turned into weeks, I began to notice things I shouldn't. How his shirt clung after a day's labor, the quiet strength in his hands when carrying heavy loads, the brightness in his eyes when he smiled. I found myself lingering over these details longer than I should have, dismissing them as harmless admiration. Yet a quiet warning in my mind suggested that change was on the horizon, something I wasn't ready to face. For now, I shoved those thoughts aside, focusing instead on the solace his presence provided. Nevertheless, I sensed that life on the farm was transforming in ways not yet clear to me. The days took on a different rhythm, with work serving as an excuse to remain close to Justin. We moved through the chores side by side, our conversations easy and full of laughter. Beneath this, though, subtle shifts occurred, small disruptions in my familiar routines. It started with lingering glances, moments when our eyes met and held for a touch too long. Though always kind, Justin's attentiveness began to feel different. He often found reasons to stay near, offering assistance even when it wasn't called for. "Let me take care of that, Aunt Megan," he'd say, his voice warm and calming. But the way he sometimes looked at me, with a soft, almost inquisitive gaze, made my heart race. I dismissed it as my imagination, convincing myself I was overthinking. Yet the signs were increasingly hard to dismiss. One evening, while we repaired a fence, his hand accidentally brushed mine. It was innocent enough, but the warmth from his touch sent a shiver through me. I looked up, startled, to see him gazing at me, his expression unreadable. My heart raced as I quickly turned away, pretending to concentrate on the task at hand. Then came the moments when he seemed on the verge of saying something significant, but held back. "Aunt Megan," he started one night as we sat on the porch beneath the twinkling stars. His voice was low and almost hesitant, but before he could continue, he shook his head and forced a smile. "Forget it. It's insignificant." A knot of discomfort started to form within me. I began to doubt my emotions, attempting to unravel the tangled mess in my heart. Was I just imagining the way his hand lingered when he brushed by me in the kitchen, the softness in his laughter when he spoke to me? I assured myself these were typical signs of familial affection. Yet, the butterflies in my stomach at his touch said otherwise. I also sensed a change within myself. I started paying extra attention to my looks, spending more time on my hair, picking clothes that made me feel attractive. The changes were minor, ones I rationalized as self-care, but deep down, I knew the truth. The reflection in the mirror didn't lie. There was a newfound spark in my eyes that had been absent for years, and it scared me. One night, lying in bed and staring at the ceiling, the day's events played over in my mind. Justin's smile during dinner, the way his voice softened at my name, it all felt too significant to dismiss. I turned over, burying my face in the pillow, trying to suppress these growing emotions. But an undeniable truth lingered. Something was happening between us, something beyond explanation that seemed unstoppable. By morning, I had resolved to put distance between us, reestablishing the boundaries that once were clear. However, upon entering the kitchen, there Justin was, his smile brightening the room. "Good morning," he greeted, his tone warm and inviting. And with that, my determination crumbled. I persuaded myself it was meaningless, mere fleeting feelings fueled by loneliness and proximity. But as the days went by and the tension thickened, I questioned if I was being truthful with myself. Was this really nothing? Or was it the start of something I wasn't prepared to confront? It began gently, almost unnoticeably, but the exchanges between Justin and me seemed to carry an unspoken weight. Each day, the atmosphere between us became more intense, charged with an unvoiced tension neither of us dared to speak of. I told myself to keep my distance, to focus on daily chores, yet the attraction toward him was irresistible, as if an invisible magnet pulled us closer. One afternoon, while we worked near the barn, the sun blazing above, Justin caught my attention. His shirt, damp with sweat, stuck to his well-defined frame, and for a moment I couldn't avert my gaze. He flashed a charming, boyish grin that always made my heart skip, prompting me to quickly turn my eyes to the ground, pretending to be preoccupied with the hay bales. "You've been quiet today," he remarked, concern lacing his voice. "Is something troubling you?" I shook my head, forcing a smile. "Just tired," I responded, avoiding eye contact. Yet I knew he saw through me. He always did. Later, as we sat on the porch watching the sun dip below the horizon, Justin leaned closer than usual, his arm grazing mine. The warmth of his skin sent a shiver through me, and my breath caught in my throat. He didn't move away, nor did I. Instead, we sat there together, the silence between us dense with unspoken feelings. "Aunt Megan," he murmured, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'm not sure how to say this, but I sense something's changed between us." Facing him, heart racing, I asked, "What do you mean?" Though apprehensive about hearing the reply. He paused, lowering his gaze to his hands. "I realize it's inappropriate, but you've been on my mind constantly. You're all I think about." His voice was emotional, and when he finally looked up, his eyes revealed a vulnerability that left me breathless. I was at a loss for words. My mind swirled with emotions and confusion I had endeavored to suppress. "Justin, we can't," I began, but my voice wavered as he gently clasped my hand. "I know," he admitted, his voice a mere whisper, "but my feelings are beyond my control, and I believe you feel it too." I attempted to withdraw my hand, but his hold remained steady, not harsh but firm, as if he dreaded letting go. I glanced at our entwined hands, feeling my heart pound, and for a brief moment, I let myself embrace it, the bond, the warmth, the undeniable attraction growing between us. "This isn't about what I feel," I murmured softly, my voice shaky. "It isn't right. But it's genuine," he replied, his voice calm and intense. "I can't keep pretending it isn't." I was at a loss for words because, in my heart, I knew he was correct. The emotions I had tried so hard to suppress were emerging, undeniable and impossible to ignore. Yet, the burden of what we were jeopardizing, the lines we were crossing, was daunting. The following days blurred by with secretive glances, prolonged touches, and moments charged with an energy neither of us could control. One night, while we harvested the season's last apples, Justin steadied me as I descended the ladder. His hands griped firmly on my waist, and when our eyes met, I caught a glimpse of something in his gaze that stole my breath. "Be cautious," he murmured, his tone gentle yet unwavering. "I don't want you getting hurt." I nodded, speechless, as his hands lingered on my waist a moment too long after helping me down. I stepped back, attempting to put some space between us, but the tension was unmistakable. Later, sitting by the fire, the flickering flames casting shadows, Justin drew near. "I can't keep acting like this isn't happening," he said, his voice low and emotional. "I'm done fighting this." My heart raced as I stared at him, and before I could reply, he leaned forward, his lips softly brushing mine in a hesitant kiss. It was like a spark setting a wildfire ablaze, and suddenly all reasons this was wrong dissolved. I pulled away, my thoughts racing, but the longing in his eyes and something deeper kept me rooted in place. "Justin, we shouldn't do this," I whispered, lacking conviction. "I can't stop," he said simply, gently brushing a strand of my hair aside. As he leaned in again, kissing me with tenderness and passion combined, I realized I didn't want to stop either. The line crossed that night couldn't be reversed. Every kiss, every touch seemed to unravel the carefully constructed life I had built. Justin's lips were soft yet determined, each touch on my skin awakening emotions long dormant. But as the heat of the moment faded, reality rushed in like a cold wave. We sat silently on the edge of the bed, the air thick with unsaid words. Justin took my hand, his thumb gently tracing circles on my palm. "I don't regret this," he said softly, his voice unwavering. Not one bit. I couldn't meet his eyes. My mind raced with the implications of what we'd done, what it meant, and the consequences if anyone found out. "Justin, it extends beyond us. People wouldn't understand. It's not just about us. People wouldn't understand. I don't care what people think," he said, filled with quiet resolve. "I care about you." Though his words echoed in the room, they did little to lighten the heaviness in my chest. "It's not that simple," I whispered, withdrawing my hand and facing the window. Moonlight flooded the room, casting long shadows that reflected the doubts clouding my mind. Justin approached, closing the gap between us. "I know it's complicated, Aunt Megan," he stated, his voice soft but determined. "I've never felt this way before, not about anyone." Tears pricked my eyes as I turned to him. "This can't work, Justin. We're family." He stepped closer, resting his hands gently on my shoulders. "You feel it too." "I know you do," his eyes searching mine. "You can't deny what's between us." Though I wanted to argue, to push him away, the truth was undeniable. The way my heart raced near him, his touch sending shivers down my spine. It was all too real. But that didn't make it right. The subsequent days were a mix of intense feelings. We attempted to revert to normal, but the bond between us was undeniable. Every quick glance, every accidental touch sparked the flame we had tried to put out. One evening, as we worked in the barn, I sensed his gaze on me. I turned and saw him watching, his intense stare leaving me breathless. "Justin, we have to stop this," I murmured softly. "I don't want to stop," he said, moving nearer. "And I don't think you do either." Before I could reply, the sound of a car in the driveway interrupted us. My heart raced as I turned to the barn door. It was Mrs. Foster, our neighbor, bringing over some supplies. Her timing was perfect, but it reminded us of the outside world, a world that would not understand what was happening between us. That night, I couldn't sleep, staring at the ceiling, torn between guilt, desire, and fear. I thought of my late husband, the life we had built, the promises I'd made. Yet, thoughts of Justin, his kindness, laughter, and how he made me feel alive filled my mind. The conflict within me was intense, and I was uncertain which side would prevail. The breaking point came quietly one Sunday afternoon. sitting on the porch with Justin, the air heavy with unresolved tension. He reached for my hand, his grip soft yet firm. "We have to discuss this," he said calmly. "We can't pretend nothing has changed." I nodded, struggling to speak. "I know," I whispered. "But what should we do? How do we move forward?" "Together," he replied simply, determination in his eyes. His words inspired hope yet filled me with fear. Could we face the world together, despite judgment and consequences? Before I could answer, footsteps made us tense. Mrs. Foster stood at the porch's edge, her face a mix of confusion and concern. "Sorry to interrupt," she said reluctantly. "I just came to return your pie dish." The air was thick with tension, her eyes filled with questions. Had she noticed or heard anything? Fear of discovery swept over me, and I forced a smile. "Thank you, Mrs. Foster," I said as I accepted the dish. "That's very kind of you." She nodded, her gaze lingering on Justin before turning away. As she walked down the driveway, my heart pounded. The reality hit me like a train. "Justin, this has to stop," I said, turning to him. "It's too risky." His face darkened, but he agreed. "I understand," he replied, resignation in his voice. "But my feelings won't change." The days afterward were filled with tense silence. We avoided each other as best we could, trying to handle our impossible situation. Yet the connection persisted, a constant, undeniable pull. The tension reached a climax one night. Justin knocked on my bedroom door, determination and vulnerability in his eyes. "I can't do this anymore," he said, his voice shaking. "I can't pretend this doesn't matter." I looked at him, my heart pounding. "Justin, please." Before I said more, he stepped forward, holding my face. "I love you," he confessed, his voice raw with emotion. "I've tried to fight it, but I can't. And I don't think you can either." Tears flowed as I met his gaze, his words overwhelming me. "I love you too," I whispered, my voice breaking. "But it's complicated." "It doesn't have to be," he assured me, pulling me into his embrace. And in that moment, I realized there was no going back. After that night, everything felt different. The farm, once a safe haven, now seemed like a stage where secrets hid in every shadow. Justin and I tried to maintain distance, but the line we crossed had irreversibly altered our relationship. The burden of guilt was overwhelming, but the idea of losing what we had discovered made it hard to completely detach. The first signs of repercussions appeared sooner than anticipated. Mrs. Foster, our observant neighbor, began visiting more often. On the surface, her visits seemed casual, offering vegetables and inquiring about the farm, but I could detect curiosity in her gaze. She noticed how Justin and I avoided looking at each other when she was around, and how we tensed up in her presence. I told myself it was paranoia, yet deep down, I knew she suspected something. Soon, rumors started to circulate. The clerk at the local store greeted me with a knowing grin that sent chills down my spine. A neighbor's passing comment, "You and Justin seem awfully close these days," was said with a tone that unsettled my stomach. I attempted to dismiss it, but the glances, hidden smirks, and muted conversations were impossible to overlook. One day, as Justin and I were working in the orchard, he paused mid-task, wiping sweat from his forehead. "I can't stand this," he said, his voice weighted with frustration. "The way people look at us, the things they're saying, it's driving me mad." I sighed, putting down a basket of apples. "We knew this wouldn't be easy, Justin. People were bound to talk." "It's more than mere talk," he replied, stepping closer. "They're judging you. I see it every time you go into town. It's not right." His concern touched my heart, yet it deepened my guilt. "Their opinions don't matter," I said, though my unsteady voice betrayed me. "What matters is that we know the truth." "But what is the truth?" he asked, his voice low. "That we've found something genuine, or that we're risking everything for something people won't understand." His words lingered, and I had no response. The truth was, I wasn't sure what we were doing anymore. What I did know was that being with Justin made me feel truly alive in a way I hadn't experienced in years. But at what expense? The turning point occurred one evening when Mrs. Foster arrived unexpectedly. She stood on the porch, her expression stern, holding a pie dish I hadn't realized I had left at her place. "Can we talk?" she asked curtly. I nodded, my heart racing as I led her to the kitchen. Justin hovered in the doorway, his presence quietly reassuring. Mrs. Foster set the dish on the counter, turning to me with a piercing look. "Megan," she started, her voice firm yet low. "I don't like to meddle, but people are talking, and what's being said isn't good." My cheeks burned with heat, her words' weight pressing on me. "I don't understand," I said, forcing a smile that felt empty. "You do," she replied, her eyes narrowing. "Justin's a good young man, but he's your nephew. People are beginning to question your relationship." The silence that followed was deafening. I opened my mouth, but no words came. Justin then stepped forward, his voice steady. "We don't owe anyone an explanation," he said calmly but firmly. "What happens here is our affair, not theirs." Mrs. Foster looked at him, a mix of shock and disapproval on her face. "Be careful," she warned sharply. "Secrets like this don't stay hidden for long. When exposed, they ruin everything." She left without another word, the screen door slamming behind her. The tension was suffocating and tears pricked my eyes. "She's right," I said, my voice trembling. "This can't stay hidden indefinitely." Justin moved closer, his hands gently resting on my shoulders. "Let them talk," he said softly. "Let them judge. None of it matters as long as we have each other." But it wasn't that simple. The rumors grew louder, and the stares more intense. Friends I had known for a long time started to pull away, their cordial smiles concealing the judgment in their eyes. Feeling cut off was overwhelming, and the strain started to affect me. Justin stood by me, trying to shield me during every tense interaction and whispered comment, but the pressure was evident. We argued more often, our disputes driven by tension and fear. "Why do you care so much about their opinions?" he asked one night, his voice filled with hurt. "Because I live here," I snapped back, tears flowing. "This is my home, Justin, my life, and it's collapsing." He looked at me, his face showing pain. "I never wanted to hurt you," he murmured. I thought we could be happy." "I did too," I replied, my voice shaky, but I wasn't sure if we could. The following days were filled with intense tension. The weight of our choices bore down on us, making me question if the love we found was worth what we might lose. Yet, despite my doubts, letting him go seemed impossible. The days on the farm seemed endless, heavy with the strain of trying to move forward. Our love that once felt vitally important now felt burdensome, weakened by the world's whispers and judgment. Every glance, every touch carried both longing and guilt. We had crossed a line, making our path forward an uphill climb. Sleepless nights filled my time, questioning everything, my decisions, my emotions, and the life I had created. The farm, once my sanctuary, felt like a prison, its walls tightening around me. I thought about Justin and how he brought joy back into my life, and I couldn't bear the thought of losing that. Yet I couldn't ignore the turmoil we'd caused, threatening everything dear to us. One evening, as the sun set in hues of orange and pink, Justin found me on the porch. His approach was slow, his face reflecting both determination and sorrow. "We need to talk," he stated, his voice steady yet soft. I nodded, preparing for the conversation ahead. He sat next to me, hands clenched in his lap. "I've been thinking," he began, gazing at the dim light. "About us. About what this has done to you." I faced him, my chest tightening. "Justin, you don't have to." "I do," he interrupted gently, locking eyes with me. "I love you, Megan, more than I ever thought possible. But I see what this is doing to you, to your life. I don't want to be the reason you lose everything." Tears welled up as I held his hand. "You're not the reason," I said, my voice trembling. We both chose this." He nodded, his jaw set. "I know, but sometimes love isn't enough. Sometimes the world doesn't let us have what we want." His truth hit hard. I wanted to argue, say we could fight for what we shared, but deep down, I knew he was right. Our love was genuine, but the cost was too high. It wasn't just others' judgment, it was our own guilt, woven into every part of our lives. "I don't want to lose you," I whispered, my voice breaking, "but I don't know how to hold on." Justin moved closer, his hand caressing my cheek. "You'll never lose me," he said softly. "I'll always be here for you. But maybe, for both our sakes, this needs to end." His words pierced my heart, but I couldn't deny the truth. Despite my deep love for him, I knew our current life wasn't sustainable. We sat in silence, the weight of our choices cloaking us like a thick blanket. In the following days, Justin made plans to leave the farm. He stayed just long enough to prepare everything for the next season, fixing fences, restocking supplies, ensuring all was in order. His presence was a bittersweet comfort, a reminder of what we were sacrificing. The morning he left was quiet, the sky gray and overcast. We stood by the old truck, enveloped in unspoken words. He pulled me into a tight hug, gently stroking my hair as I clung to him. "I'll always love you," he murmured, his voice thick with emotion. "I love you too," I replied, tears soaking his shirt. "Always." As he drove away, the loneliness I had been avoiding hit hard, but this time it was laced with a strange peace. Justin and I had shared something rare and beautiful, but discovered that love, no matter how profound, couldn't exist in isolation. It required space to grow, and sometimes that meant letting go. In time, the whispers faded, and life on the farm regained its rhythm. The pain of losing Justin lingered, but transformed into a reminder of the love that once revived me. It became part of me, not as a burden, but as a lesson in the fragility of human connections and the strength in letting go. As seasons changed, I found solace anew. The farm, once a symbol of loneliness, became a place of reflection and renewal. I learned to find joy in simple pleasures again, the sun's warmth, the wind in the trees, and memories of a fleeting yet indelible love. What would you do in her situation? Could love justify crossing such forbidden lines? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Remember to like the video and subscribe for more stories that test love, loyalty, and morality limits. Stay tuned, our next story might make you question everything you know about relationships.